Hi, everybody. Thanks on Zoomland and here to join us. And we are looking forward to telling you about the programs that we've been working on for the last 6 years. So the programs that we're going to be talking about today, I began at Indiana University years ago, and then was asked by Kansas F-Score MAPS to participate in their grant as part of the workforce development. And so I wrote in similar programs to the ones that I began at Indiana University that are actually ongoing. And they have been really successful here. And they've been really successful in large part because of the community's investment in them. So I am so grateful to the KBS, EEB, the undergrads and grad students here, and the Lawrence community for allowing us to have these programs be successful. They wouldn't have been successful without your support. So the project goals for these two programs are to provide support for Kansas teachers and KU's K-12 students understanding of next generation science standards through the development of activities and experiments that focus on the ecosystems of campus. One of the things that I should have said to begin with is this grant is ending. So part of what we're hoping to do is encourage the community to, in some way, continue these activities, because I think that they're really important to the students and teachers of local Kansas public schools and the broader community of Kansas public schools. So I'm going to be introducing you to we all, Jennifer and Tara, are going to be working together to share these programs and different iterations of these programs. The two programs that we're going to be talking about today are the Kansas Ecosystems for Elementary Students, or KEYS, that's a faster way to say this, and the Ecosystems of Kansas Summer Institute, which I'm going to refer to as the Summer Institute. So KEYS is working with elementary school students, third graders, and the Ecosystems of Kansas, we're working with Kansas high school teachers across all of Kansas. So the purpose and the goal is to bring ecology and evolutionary biology lessons to local third grade classrooms. And we chose third grade because within the next generation science standards for third grade, there's natural selection, there's biomes, all of those concepts are introduced or expanded upon from earlier grades. And so part of what we hope to do is to nurture a sense of place, and nurture a sense of place in students for their local environments, for the ecosystems of Kansas, and then the organisms that co-occur with the students or occur throughout the state of Kansas. And we think it's important to bring science to students in their classrooms. There are some students whose families have the ability to take them to special programs. And there are other families where that isn't possible for whatever reason. And so when we go to classrooms, all of the students can participate. And we have developed hands-on experiential learning for them, and that is experimentally driven. And this is important at a time in public schools where teachers are needing to deal with larger and larger classrooms, where the resources for learning about science are limited or non-existent, where the teachers are being asked to teach science through programs like Mystery Science, where they watch videos and then they fill out worksheets. So the students have limited ability to actually set up a simple experiment or even look at organisms to begin to develop an appreciation for their environment and for the ecosystem services that are provided to us through our ecosystems and our environment. The other really important piece that we so appreciate is development of relationships between students, third graders, and the people that come and visit. So some of the people here have come and worked with the students, and I'm sort of the enforcer. I try to make sure that the kids are behaving at least somewhat appropriately, but they really like undergrads and grad students. They have a bond with them. And so when they see their friends coming through the door, they're very, very excited and really enjoy working with them. So in this picture, this is from just last week when Nicole was with us, and she took amazing pictures. So we are talking about soil, the living soil, and we have bins with soil and leaf litter and rotting logs, and the kids are looking through to find the critters in there. They also plated petri dishes to see which bacteria are growing in soils. So that is one of the fun things that they did this past time we visited. We got our foot in the door to begin with by talking to principals and teachers saying, we are going to support next generation science standards through learning about local ecology and the ecosystem services that they provide. And so that was huge. So by teachers, again, have limited resources. So when someone comes and says, we're going to bring all the supplies, all the people, we're going to come in and then we're going to leave, and you have your classroom back, and you don't have to do anything but watch and try to integrate the exercises, the activities that you're doing into your curriculum. And we also provide books that support what we're doing, so the teachers can read to the students about those concepts or biomes or organisms that we're talking about. We serve a diverse group of students. So when we reached out to schools, the students that the schools that reached back out were Title I schools. And Title I schools are schools where at least 40% of the students receive free and reduced lunch. And so we are we're serving a diverse group of students socioeconomically, ethnically, and we really enjoy working with them. 1/3 of the classrooms that we work with are taught in Spanish. So Scott Dual Language Elementary science is taught in Spanish. So we have an amazing part of our team, Claudia Nunez Pinchet, Tita Hernandez, Laura Jimenez, who have all been part of the program. And again, we couldn't have participated, interacted with these amazing students and their teachers without their willingness to participate and be a part of our team. So we go through many iterations. We're going to talk about many iterations of keys. So in the beginning, we would bring our 4 to 6 people with all kinds of different materials. It was a lot to bring in to the classrooms. And then we would do 3 or 4 activities with the students. They would rotate through. So we would divide them up into small groups and rotate through these activities. We always began with a brief introduction, because 3rd graders have a limited attention span. So we would introduce, in this case, we're talking about biomes, and we focused on the biomes of Kansas that the students might experience. So deciduous forest, tall grass prairie were the focus of the biomes we talked about. And then, as I said, we divided the students into small groups. So here you're looking at kiddos dissecting owl pellets, art owl pellets, skins from the museum of different tall grass prairie animals. skulls of carnivores and herbivores, and how they might use their teeth to eat the food that the energy resource or the food that they eat. And then we would leave experiments. So in this case, we call them worm hotels. We gathered tennis ball containers from KU Tennis Club and filled them with soil and then leaf litter and added worms to one and left out worms for the other. We added, and then the teachers observed added water so the students could see over time what's happening, how the worms serve as decomposers as part of one piece of the trophic levels. That was another lesson we talked about. And then COVID happened and students had to stay at home. Teachers had to figure out how to teach virtually. And we had to pivot and figure out a way to interact with students in a very different way. And so I'm going to then now have Tara talk about what we did. She did a whole lot to allow this next iteration to be successful.
So when we realized we couldn't go into the classrooms anymore, we wanted a way to still support these students while they were at home with their families learning online. So we started a series of videos, and we took the ideas, the lessons, the science standards that we had been targeting in the in-person lessons and tried to incorporate them into videos that had some narrative components, and we're also engaging through things like animations and question and answer periods. So I'm just going to walk you through our 7 episodes of Ecosystems of Kansas for elementary students, and we did this with support from Eleanor Gardner at the Natural History Museum, and so these are available on the Natural History Museum Facebook page as well as the KBS-CER YouTube channel, and just you can find them on YouTube generally. And we also posted them both in English and Spanish, again with the help of Laura and Tita and Claudia. So our first episode, we introduced the idea of biomes, and I recognize some of these images from the Natural History Museum if you've been there. So we talked about biomes, and we introduced the idea of adaptation to ecosystems a little bit, talking about the different ecosystem properties and how the plants and animals there might be adapted to them. And then we moved into talking about ecosystems of Kansas. So we started with the prairie biome, and we talked about the importance of burning prairies and also how plants are adapted to come back from burning. We got a little more into adaptation and started introducing the idea of trophic levels by talking about plants, herbivores, and carnivores, and how herbivores are adapted to eating plants and carnivores are adapted to eating herbivores. Then we talked about the deciduous forest biome in Kansas and Missouri, and we used some of the plants in deciduous forests, like the jewelweed or pawpaw, that are useful to humans, to talk about humans interacting with the ecosystem, and talk about tribes that have lived and do live in this area, as well as continuing talking about adaptations and trophic levels. And it was in this video that we introduced the model of the trophic levels to them and walked them through that model so they could start learning about how to make a model. And then we talked about rivers, lakes, and streams. Again, we talked about some of the ecosystem properties of water and of ponds and rivers and lakes, as well as reinforcing trophic levels by talking about the trophic levels of aquatic organisms and showing them some cool videos of dragonfly larvae and caddisflies. And then this one was really fun. We talked about ecosystems of Kansas from long ago. So we went all the way back to when Kansas was covered in water. We talked about how the animals that lived here and how fossils are formed. I think that's another target, talking about fossils in 3rd grade in GSS. And we also continued talking about adaptations using animals from the Pleistocene era. And we introduced a model of natural selection in this video based on our natural selection lizard, based on our natural selection lesson that we did in person in the classrooms. We created an animation to show how, for instance, green lizards might get eaten more if all the greenery is gone, and then the next generations might not have as many green lizards. Then we talked about interconnection of ecosystems. We talked about wetlands and how wetlands act as a filter for soil and nutrients. And we talked a little bit about disturbance and how humans can disturb important ecosystems like wetlands, which brings us to our final episode, which is preserving and protecting our ecosystems. And Robin Walker was the author of the Common Book that year, Grading Sweetgrass, and we were really inspired by her. And if it's okay, can I play this?
Yeah, we can
I need to
try. I think you need to.
You need to mute.
I need to mute this. Unmute. Yes.
Oh. Can you unmute the computer? I don't know where it is. Sorry. Well, I think I'm just gonna instead of playing it.
Okay.
Yeah. Not working. It was supposed to just be able to play on there and not go through the link and all that. In this episode, we hit a little bit again, bringing back the wetlands and how people can disturb ecosystems, but mostly we talked about ways that we can preserve and protect our ecosystems. We talked about reciprocity, which is something that Dr. Kimmer talked about in her book. And so reinforcing that we are all a part of ecosystems that we live in, and that we get a lot from our ecosystems, so we can also give back to our ecosystems by volunteering, by becoming educated. We talked about citizen science and all the different kinds of activities that a 3rd grader, with the help of their parents, might be able to do to preserve and protect our ecosystems. So that's how we dealt with kids not being in the classroom, and then we got to go back to the classroom. So
all right. Sure.
So I joined the project in the spring of 2022, and we had to make another pivot again with the projects. The students at this point were back in the classroom, but the schools were not inviting outside guests to come in at this point for COVID precautions. So, and the videos are great, but we still wanted that more interactive aspect of the lessons. And so the activities were modified. Those 3 or 4 activities that had been done before, where students would circulate through, were simplified and modified so that students could work independently, so social distancing could be maintained. And so this involved gathering a whole bunch of materials and individual kits for each student and dropping those off at the schools, and then zooming in, and this is a screen caption of Kara teaching the lesson and giving instructions, and then what's going on with the students and the teachers helping them with individual tasks. And one lesson that became shorter and simpler was that bird beak adaptation. So what in the past, before times of COVID, this involved bringing in different, they had some pliers and tweezers, but they also had some tongs with a basin of water, maybe duckbills that, and they'll, try to catch seeds, try to catch the worms in the water. That this was too much to have the teachers do. So the lesson was simplified. And in this case, physical models of the bird beak. So the tweezers for the thin, narrow beak of the meadowlark, and we had pliers for the thicker, stronger, more robust beak of the cardinal. And then we gave the students a series of challenges. How many tiny sesame seeds can you pick up in 30 seconds? How many big sunflower seeds can you crack in 15 seconds? We even made model holes in the ground that the students then would test out. And there's mealworms in here. How easy is it to pick those up? Really hard with the pliers. So some students managed to do it. I think they might have cheated a little bit. Hole in the ground. And some people with the, and then again with the tweezers. So that was a modification that was made and worked really well. But it was still very stressful and put a lot on the teacher because they were the only hands there to help. So we were very thankful when later in the spring of 2020, we were able to go back to the classroom full time, well, have all us in the classroom, but we kept that kind of simpler modification model. So instead of trying to have stations where the students circulated about, we had one activity or a couple activities, and we would lead those all as a class. We still tried to bring as many facilitators and helpers as possible, I call them helpers, so that there can be a lot of hands-on guidance for the students. And that's been really great to do that. And so we're still working under that model right now. When I came onto the project, another goal was to develop a lesson involving microbes, which is kind of tricky because we can't bring in microscopes for students to look at. And so we developed an experimental lesson. Last spring, this lesson followed the trophic levels lesson. So we really started off talking about how there are producers that are microbes and decomposers that are microbes and predators that are microbes. We also wanted to bring an experimental element in and to say what happens, and we kind of switch back to talking about producers, but what happens to producers when we disrupt their environment. So we looked at plants, we looked at algae, and we disrupted the environment. I'm supposed to be doing this on the screen here, sorry, by using salt and adding nutrients in the form of fertilizers. And so the experimental setup was we had 3 jars. We did this with plants, and I'll show you that in a second. We had the control, we had added salt, we had added nutrients, and I collected algae just from the pond up here on this campus. And we found these cool little Secchi sticks that work like a Secchi disc, except for they're, a little ruler this long. Same thing, you put them down. So it's really cool to show the students techniques. We can't take them all out on the lake, but we can say, this is what somebody who studies a lake does, except for bigger. You're doing the same thing. Teach them how to do measurements, how to millimeters. So that was fun. For the plant part of the experiment, Kara grew a bunch of radishes, and then same thing, we treated them with salt or with nutrients. They would measure stem length and count the number of leaves. And then we made these cute little data sheets that they collected data on. And we did this 1 week, and we came back 2 weeks later. So we actually asked the teachers to have them collect data the week that we weren't there, and they did that. And we also, as we set this up, we talked about control and experimental design. And we also talked about making predictions, which was kind of tricky, was something that they hadn't really thought about. And so that was a some of the tricky things. When we went back 2 weeks later, we gathered up their data sheets. Now they're third graders. There were some errors in the data, but that's all right. It's about learning. It's really about learning the process of science. And so as they were doing a different activity, I actually had a spreadsheet, entered their data, and we talked about what their data looked like versus their predictions. Now this is some really nice clean data, so I'm showing you the clean data. So just again, an introduction to what that process of science is and using some real science techniques. So that was a new lesson that we developed. So this year, starting in the fall of this academic year, starting in the fall, we did 4 lessons, again, back into the school full time. We did a trophic level lesson where we brought skulls of coyotes and deer and beavers and talked about how their teeth were related to what they ate. Students also dissected some plants and also a mushroom, which was really fun for them to get over the gross ick of mushrooms. We did the adaptation lesson that I talked about with the kind of hybrid model. And that was really fun. We did a natural selection lesson, and Tara kind of mentioned this, that they created these really cool habitats. And when we're done here, if anybody wants to come play, yeah. So we have orange habitat. We have another one that has green habitat, and there's a clothing on here. And again, the students are pretending to be the birds, and they have a closed kind of bird beaks. And there are, in both of these, I think it's 7 orange lizards and 7 green lizards. And we give them 30 seconds to capture as many lizards as they can. And then we have them write down the data, and then they do it again. And then we put all the classes data up on the board and show that, oh, hey, fewer orange lizards were captured in orange habitat and fewer green lizards were captured in green habitat, and how that leads to natural selection. So that's a fun lesson. And then we ended the fall semester with owl pellet dissection, which is again a fun lesson. This year, in the spring semester, we started with a soils lab where we looked at physical properties of soil, but also talked about the organic matter of soil. And then we decided to split that microbes lesson up into 2 parts and to simplify the experimental part. So right before spring break, we did the living soil lesson that Peggy was talking about, where they looked at soil, they plated some soil bacteria, and we also looked at, Tara had grown some alfalfa. So we looked at the root nodules on alfalfa and talked about that relationship between plants and rhizobium. This week, we're in the middle of doing the aquatic microbes lesson, which we have simplified it to just a control and a nutrient treatment. And so we'll see how that goes when we go back. And then the final lesson we're going to do is a seed dispersal lesson, where we're going to teach this, or have a bunch of demos showing the students wind dispersal and gravity dispersal and animal dispersal. And part of that is having them engineer their own wind dispersed seeds. We'll make a little clay seed, and then we'll have all sorts of materials they can do to make the dispersal part. And then we'll have fans and see how well their seeds disperse. So we're kind of tapping into that engineering portion of the science standards. All right, so this, I'm going to just talk a little bit. This was, and kind of hit on what Peggy was saying about these relationships that we form with these children. This is at Scott Dual Language Elementary School in Topeka. This was their last day before spring break, and they were having Spirit Day, and each grade picked a theme, and they chose middle ages. So that's why they're all dressed up. And when we went to one of the classes, the teacher's like, all right, listen, this is the only thing you have to learn today. And I was like, oh man, they're not going to be engaged. But they really were engaged, and they were really excited to see us. And I think it's also really important, not only for us to guide them in these lessons, but for them to see what scientists look like. So it's not so like a scary person in a lab coat. So yeah, that turned out to be a really fun day. So last piece of this for the keys in the next step is that we want to publish these activities, make them available to teachers across Kansas, and I guess anybody could access them. And so we're packaging them in terms of materials that the teachers need, maybe additional questions if they want to delve further, other resources. But we're also aligning them with the next generation science standards and making that very clear to teachers is this is how this aligns with those next generation science standards. And this is my spreadsheet that's still a work in progress. You don't need to read all of it, but I want to highlight, again, the third grade. Why third grade is because there's a lot of standards that are about ecology and evolution and natural selection. So it's a good fit at that level. So we're looking at the core concepts, for example, interdependent relationships and ecosystems, but we're also hitting the cross-cutting concepts and the science and engineering practices. So that's what we're doing at the elementary schools. And I'm going to turn it back over to Peggy to talk about the other part of this, which is the Summer Institute.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Yeah, so I said earlier that there's two components of, or two programs that we began through X4 Maps. And this second one is the audience and the participants are high school biology and environmental science teachers. And we are doing that because these teachers teach one subject, and people from KU, Kansas Biological Survey, Center for Ecological Research don't have time to go into classrooms and be there all day to share lessons. So we work with teachers in the summer. So in the Institute is held in early June, the first 5 days of the week in early June, because we don't want to interrupt the teachers' summers, and we want to work with teachers outside where there's a chance that the weather will be accommodating to them. So every year we fund 10 teachers. Teachers apply and then are selected in early spring. The funding includes a stipend for the week, room and board if the teachers live more than an hour away, funding for travel for the 5-day program. We also supply teachers with an average of $500 for materials for their classrooms so that they have a way, if they develop lessons during the program, that they have the ability to buy the tools, the equipment that they need. It has been the Summer Institute began at the University of Kansas, and the second year it was at Kansa Prairie Biological Station. Then COVID hit. We were hoping to rotate between these institutions, but for logistical reasons, we've continued at KU. It just is much easier to run the program here, given that all the infrastructure is already here. So this program, as I said before, couldn't have happened without a whole bunch of support from the KU community, EEB, KBS, also the UCAN Teach, members of the UCAN Teach program also participated. And it is always, I think, enjoyable for the teachers. It's inspiring, and what was the word I was supposed to say?
Inspiring.
Inspiring. It was inspiring for the teachers. And I think that the facilitators learn a whole lot about the lives of high school teachers as well. So part of what we do is we explore diverse ecosystems. So this is Walter Dodds working with high school teachers to sample to take chemical analysis and look at macroinvertebrates in a stream at Kansa. Teachers also explored the tallgrass prairie and are collecting soil samples. They also participate in discussions and learn a variety of research techniques that may be just edifying for them, but also some that many that they can take back to their classrooms and work with their students on, like, for example, soil respiration, which is what Lydia Zeglin did with them. So the way the Institute is structured is that in the mornings, we're trying to build bonds between the teachers. So the teachers work as large groups, work at one activity in large groups, sampling, for example, the long-term research projects at the field station. They also have gone out to sample Julie Schwarting and Helen's tallgrass prairie restoration experiment at Free State, because we think that's really important for those teachers to know, well, this is possible, or a smaller version is possible. And so then the teachers have lunch. Often lunch is accompanied by facilitated discussion or an activity. For example, Fola Augusta, Dr. Fola Augusta talks about models for the teachers with the teachers. And then in the afternoons, the teachers are broken up into smaller groups based on their areas of interest, and they work with their facilitator to develop hands-on experimentally driven activities that they can take back to their classrooms. Some faculty have actually used the Summer Institute as part of their NSF broader impacts for their NSF grants and within the broader impacts. So we have had participation in faculty using that. And then, so one of the goals is to allow the teachers to know that there are members of the academic community here at KU that really appreciate what they're doing to support student education and to prepare students for the next steps. So we want them to know how much we appreciate them. So we provide them with lots of good food in addition to really fun activities. And we have a night during the program where we have them over to our house, which has got a big field around it, and supply dinner for them, and where they can interact with the facilitators and each other in a less formal way. Some of the teachers have gone on to continue to work with us through RETs. So Ms. Pam Lucas is from Skyline High School in Pratt, Kansas. And she was one of the first teachers in the Summer Institute and worked with Helen and Jim and me, and was part of a 4 or 5 teachers that wanted to, what they came up with is to do a common garden experiment looking at local adaptation of little bluestem. Actually, this is, I jumped ahead. Yeah. So I'm gonna, and so only 2 of the teachers in the end had data to share. The teachers, again, are under a lot of constraints. And so she collected the data, and then working with Tara and me and Jim and Helen wrote a paper, and it was accepted at the transactions of the Kansas Academy of Sciences. And so the other thing that she did as part of her RET is working with myself and an REU student from Haskell. And together we developed a curricula that focused on the Konza Prairie ecosystem. So we developed 9 lessons. Some of them were, many of them were biological in nature, and some of them were focused on the cultures of the Native American tribes that lived in the tallgrass prairie. And one of the lessons we partnered with a science educator from Northwestern, and he had developed this computer simulation model for the Serengeti that Pam actually was using in her classroom. And we thought, well, couldn't we modify this and talk about the tallgrass prairie and bison and cattle and infections? And so he helped us. He worked with us to develop this model that she is hopefully, I haven't been in communication with her in the last year or 2, is still using with her classrooms. And we told the education folks at Konza about it and shared the Google Docs with them. So I don't know how broadly this is being disseminated, but I'm hoping, I think it's a really good package of for Kansas teachers to use in their classrooms. So we're looking forward to our last summer that is funded, of the Summer Institute that's funded by EPSCoR MAPS, since it's ending. And we're going to do it a little bit differently this year. We're going to be working with middle school teachers because we haven't been able to work with middle school teachers to date, since high school teachers are focused on one subject, one discipline, and middle school teachers have a whole range of sciences that they have to cover. But the program is similar. It's shorter. We thought that it would be easier for teachers to participate if it was shorter. So it's just 3 days instead of 5 days. But it's a similar design. We have large group activities for teachers to get to know each other in the mornings, and then followed by lunch discussions and perhaps activities during lunch, and then dividing the teachers up into small group activities in the afternoons based on their areas of interest. But instead of having one facilitator throughout the week, they can pick and choose different areas to supply them with information that they might want. And so I think it's going to be really an amazing time. We already have 18 middle school teachers that have applied and that we've accepted. Because it's a smaller program, a shorter program, we can work with more teachers. And so one thing that I want to say is part of the reason that why we're doing this, why we're talking to you all about it, is because, well, it's really fun and we're really excited about what we've done, but that we want these programs to continue after the funding, EPSCoR MAPS funding runs out. And so in a way, it's like, this is what we've been doing, and we want to partner. We want to continue to partner with KU and KBS CER to support these programs. And Tara, you were going to talk about the importance of
support.
Oh,
local.
yes.
We're that point.
I was so absorbed in what you were saying. Yeah, so one of the reasons that these programs are so important is supporting local schools. So I wanted to be the one to talk about this, even though I just zoned out for a second, because I went to school here in Lawrence, and my kids went to school here in Lawrence. So I'm really aware of how much support teachers in Kansas need, both at the elementary and high school level. There's really limited resources for teachers, particularly in terms of teaching science at the elementary level. They don't have a lot of time, they don't have a lot of supplies, they don't have a lot of lesson plans. So getting in there and helping kids, especially at the Title I schools, is really important for not just for introducing kids to these basic concepts that we've been talking about, not just for hitting NGSS standards, but for letting kids know that science is fun. Like, a lot of kids in public schools get worksheets and they get videos and they learn vocabulary, and it's not that much fun, but this is really fun. So
yeah. And so I'm going to speak to what I had mentioned before. One of the things that our community could, one way that our community could participate in is if you're writing an NSF grant, there's always the broader impact section. And so we hope that these programs serve as a scaffolding. So when you're writing a grant, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, that you can decide, okay, I'm going to work on this area because it's my joy and I love this work, and I'm going to share it with high school teachers. So that's something that our community can gain from these programs.
Can I add to that, yeah, it's actually really easy. So several grants at KU did it. At Indiana, it was very successful. Multiple people, so you just write in individual teachers. So you would write in the stipend and everything for, I think that we had done multiple teachers. We ended up doing them all in 1 year. Maggie did it on her grant. And so it's a way of funding this program through more piecemeal. It's hard to pay for all that at once, but you can pay for teachers at a time. And
2 or 3 teachers at a time is what researchers have done in the past. Thanks, Jim.
And it's also been great to see the KBS CER involvement, but also outside of that, the KU involvement and bringing together community with undergrads and graduate students and staff members and faculty to make this happen for the students. And it also provides a way for outreach to the community so that there is some recognition of our work. I know, the students are like, okay, KU Science is here, KBS is here, and they will take that back to their parents. It's like, you'll never know what I learned today. So maybe having some recognition of the work that we do here is coming out of that. I'm going to go ahead and go to the thank you slide. So there's lots of people to thank, of course, EPSCoR Maps for funding and the support of that. The very many people, dozens of people who help prepare and develop the lessons. The third grade teachers in particular at Scott Jardine, Hillcrest, Woodlawn, and New York elementary schools for supporting us in this and allowing us to come into their classrooms. I think the third grade students for making this work a joy, and the teachers who have attended the Summer Institute. So I think unless there's anybody else you wanted to thank right now, I think we have some time for questions. And
yeah, thanks for listening.